The mansion was wrapped in a suffocating silence, its dim chandeliers flickering against marble floors still stained from past deals sealed in blood. A lone guard paced the corridor, his footsteps echoing like a countdown to doom. Anthony Rossi said, "Something feels off tonight." His hand lingered over his jacket, brushing against the grip of his pistol, as if his instincts screamed louder than reason. In the grand hall, Richard Moretti, the kingpin who ruled with iron authority, swirled a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the dying light of the fire. He muttered, "Power is only as strong as the fear it creates." Outside, rain lashed against stained glass windows, blurring the night into streaks of shadow. Then, a gunshot ripped through the silence, sharp and merciless, the sound bouncing through the cavernous halls. Richard staggered, the bourbon glass slipping from his hand, shattering into glittering fragments across the marble. He clutched his chest, his shirt blooming crimson, before collapsing to the floor. His trembling fingers reached for his phone, typing a final message. "It's done. The king is dead." His last breath escaped into the silence, and with it, the empire shifted into chaos. The sound of the gunshot had not yet faded when panic began to ripple through the mansion. Servants froze in terror, their whispers sharp and frantic as shadows flickered across the grand hall. Anthony Rossi pressed himself against the wall, his breath shallow, listening for the echo of footsteps. He whispered, "It wasn't supposed to be this fast." In the chaos, doors creaked open, and men rushed to secure the grounds, their weapons drawn, eyes darting like predators in the dark. Thunder roared outside, rattling the glass panes, amplifying the dread that choked the air. In the silence that followed, Richard's lifeless body seemed to mock every oath of loyalty sworn under his reign. Anthony's eyes burned with rage and uncertainty as he muttered, "The throne is empty, and vultures will come." He pushed forward, his shoes slipping on spilled bourbon and blood, the scent of iron thick in the air. Every corner of the mansion seemed alive, listening, waiting, preparing to swallow whoever dared to claim the fallen king's crown. The mansion gates were thrown open, headlights cutting through sheets of rain as black cars screeched to a halt. Armed men spilled out, their coats whipping in the storm. Among them was Dominic Marino, Richard's trusted lieutenant, his face carved with years of battles fought in the name of loyalty. He barked, "Seal every exit." His voice carried the weight of panic masked as authority. Anthony Rossi stepped into the downpour, his eyes locking with Dominic's, each searching for reassurance, yet finding only dread. Dominic's jaw tightened as he muttered, "We've been breached. Someone inside sold us out." The words slashed deeper than the rain, igniting sparks of paranoia in Anthony's chest. The storm raged louder, but the silence between them was deafening. In that moment, trust cracked, and the empire felt smaller, fragile, and already bleeding out into the night. Inside the mansion, whispers turned to accusations. Men who once toasted victories under Richard's banner now eyed each other like predators in a cage. A trembling servant stammered, "I saw someone slip through the east wing." The words fueled the fire, blades of suspicion cutting deeper into fragile loyalties. Anthony Rossi slammed his fist onto the table, his voice sharp, "We are not prey. We find a rat tonight." His declaration was met with nods, but eyes betrayed doubt. In every shifting shadow, betrayal seemed to lurk. The walls that once echoed with celebration now pulsed with paranoia, every corner echoing the same truth. The family was breaking before the war had even begun. In the study, a single lamp cast a pool of light across Richard's desk, now empty of his presence, but heavy with his authority. Anthony Rossi leaned against the shelves, his chest heaving, the storm outside pounding like war drums. He whispered to himself, "The king is dead, and the wolves are here." His reflection stared back at him from the glass, fractured and distorted, as though even the mirror doubted who he truly was. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts, and Dominic stepped in, his face pale yet defiant. "They'll come for us now," Dominic said. The words felt like prophecy, a death sentence already written. Anthony's eyes darkened, and he replied, "Then let them come. We'll make the first move. In that moment, the line between survival and revenge blurred, and the first stone of the coming war was set. The storm had calmed by dawn, but inside the Rossi estate, the air was heavier than the smoke from last night's gunfire. Anthony Rossi sat at the long oak table, his eyes hollow yet burning with unspoken fury. Around him, lieutenants shifted nervously, avoiding his gaze as if one wrong word could ignite another bullet. Dominic Marino said, "We can't hold this ground without making a move first." His voice carried strength, but his hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. Anthony leaned forward, his tone sharp. "The family bleeds," and someone inside sharpened the knife. His words cut through the silence, and every man felt the sting. From the shadows a new figure emerged. Isabella Romano, once a rival, now an unlikely ally. Her presence stirred whispers, her reputation as dangerous as the storm that had just passed. She said, "Your enemy is already inside these walls." The truth sat heavy in the room, and Anthony realized the war was no longer against one family, but the cancer rotting within his own. Later in the courtyard, Anthony lit a cigarette, his hands steady, though his mind raged. Dominic joined him, rainwater dripping from the trench coat he hadn't removed since the night. Anthony exhaled smoke and said, "Richard trusted ghosts. Now we choke on the smoke they left behind." Dominic shook his head, muttering, "Fear makes men dangerous, Anthony. Some already whisper you're not fit to lead." The words landed like bullets, but Anthony did not flinch. He stared at the gray horizon where the sun refused to rise fully. His voice turned colder. "Then I'll lead with fear if I must." Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Dominic looked away, troubled, knowing loyalty was no longer enough to protect them. Every shadow carried a blade, and every ally felt like another suspect waiting to strike. Inside the armory, weapons lined the walls like silent promises of death. Isabella walked between them, her heels clicking against concrete, her fingers brushing across steel barrels. She said, "You don't win wars with loyalty. You win with ruthlessness." Anthony watched her with narrowed eyes, his voice calm but edged. "Ruthlessness rots those who wield it." Isabella smirked, her tone mocking. "So did loyalty when it killed your king." Her words hung like a blade, and the men nearby stiffened, gripping their rifles tighter. Anthony stepped closer, his eyes burning into hers, whispering, "This isn't about winning. It's about who survives the longest." In that moment, the fragile thread of trust between them frayed, but necessity kept it from breaking. War had chosen its soldiers, whether they wanted it or not. Night fell heavy, wrapping the estate in a cloak of dread. The enforcer arrived, Victor Santoro, the silent blade of the syndicate. His presence alone quieted the hall, his boots striking like hammers against marble. He placed a blood-stained knife on the table, his voice low and cold. "The message has been delivered." No one asked what it meant. His work spoke louder than words. Anthony studied him, searching for cracks in the man who had built his reputation on fear. For a fleeting second, Anthony thought he saw regret flicker in Victor's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Victor looked at Anthony and said, "I serve until there is nothing left to serve." His loyalty was terrifying, because it was absolute. Yet in that loyalty was a shadow, one that Anthony knew could consume them all if left unchecked. In the chapel, candles flickered weakly against the storm, rattling stained glass. Anthony knelt before the altar, his lips moving in silent prayer, though his hands remained clenched like fists. Isabella entered quietly, her footsteps echoing against the marble floor. She whispered, "Prayers won't stop bullets." Anthony's head lifted, his eyes dark yet resolute. "No," he replied, "but they remind me I'm still human." For a moment, silence filled the sacred hall, their breaths mingling with the scent of wax and incense. Isabella's gaze softened, though her voice stayed sharp. "Humanity gets you killed in this world." Anthony stood slowly, facing her, his voice steady. "Then I'll die as a man, not a ghost." The chapel's silence swallowed them again, yet the storm outside roared louder, as if mocking his fragile faith. The city breathed fire that night, its streets alive with the roar of engines and the stench of gasoline. Rival syndicate convoys thundered down avenues, black cars loaded with armed men, their guns glinting beneath neon. Anthony Rossi stood on a rooftop overlooking the chaos, his jaw tight, eyes locked on the war unfolding below. Dominic Marino joined him, his voice gravelly. They've declared open war. Anthony's silence was heavier than words, the storm inside him sharper than the bullets tearing through the streets. A warehouse exploded in the distance, flames clawing at the night sky, shaking the ground beneath their boots. Isabella Romano appeared beside them, her tone sharp as glass. You wanted proof, Anthony. There it is. They've come for the crown. His eyes never left the inferno as he muttered, then we'll burn with them, or bury them in ash. The war had begun, and there was no turning back. The rival Mafia struck hard, torching Rossi businesses across the city. Restaurants, clubs, and safe houses erupted in flames, their loyal men slaughtered without mercy. Anthony stormed through a ruined cafe, the scent of charred wood thick in his lungs. He clenched his fists, his voice a growl. This is no warning, it's an execution. Dominic stepped carefully over shattered glass, muttering, "They want us crawling, begging to surrender." Anthony's reply was ice cold. "Then we'll answer with fire." From the corner, Isabella found a symbol painted in blood, the mark of the rival family. Her eyes narrowed, voice cutting. "They're not hiding. They want you to know it's personal." Anthony's glare hardened. Every flame outside was another coffin, waiting to be filled. In the underworld's silence, paranoia festered. Anthony gathered his men in the estate's war room, maps spread across the table, streets marked in red ink. His voice cut through tension. "They strike where we are weakest." Dominic added, "Someone inside tells them where to bleed us." Eyes darted around the room, suspicion etched in every face. Victor Santoro leaned in the corner, silent but watchful, his presence enough to silence whispers. Isabella crossed her arms, her tone razor sharp. "If you don't cut out the traitor now, the family dies by dawn." Anthony studied the faces before him, his jaw tight. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford," he said coldly. The war room became a cage, and every man inside felt the weight of unseen knives at their backs. Night deepened, and the ambush came swift. Anthony's convoy was torn apart by a hail of bullets on a deserted bridge. Tires screeched, glass shattered, and steel twisted under fire. Anthony ducked behind the wreck of his car, barking orders, "Hold your ground." Dominic returned fire, his pistol shaking yet deadly precise. Isabella dragged a wounded soldier to cover, her dress streaked with blood, snarling, "They won't stop until every one of us is gone." Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like fireworks of death, the bridge echoing with chaos. Victor moved like a ghost, cutting down attackers with ruthless efficiency, his silence more terrifying than gunfire. Anthony rose, eyes burning, unloading bullets into the night. His voice thundered, "No surrender." The bridge became a graveyard, a warning carved in blood and steel. By dawn, smoke still rose from the ruined bridge, bodies littered like broken promises. Anthony stood among the dead, rain washing blood into rivers along the asphalt. Dominic approached, his voice hoarse. "We held them, but at what cost?" Anthony's jaw clenched, his words laced with iron. "Every man who fell tonight will be answered." Isabella walked past, her eyes sharp. "The city sees weakness. If you don't strike harder, you're already finished." Anthony stared at the horizon, his chest heavy, his mind darker than the storm. Victor wiped blood from his blade in silence, his presence a grim reminder of the world they had chosen. Anthony finally whispered, "This isn't war anymore, this is survival." And with those words, the fire of vengeance ignited deeper than ever. The mansion's east wing smoldered from the night's violence, its corridors reeking of smoke and betrayal. Anthony Rossi walked slowly, his footsteps deliberate, his gaze fixed on every shadow as if it whispered treachery. Dominic Marino limped behind, his coat torn, muttering, "They knew where to strike, Anthony. Only a rat feeds them maps." Anthony's silence was an answer heavier than denial. In the war room, Isabella Romano placed fresh intel on the table, her voice sharp. "They moved faster than we could breathe. Someone here told them where to bleed us. Victor Santoro leaned against the wall, silent, the blood stain still dark on his gloves. Anthony slammed his fist into the map, scattering pieces across the floor. His words thundered. Trust died with Richard. From now on, loyalty is proven in blood. His men exchanged glances, fear etched deep, not just of the enemy, but of the man rising to lead them into hell. Later that night, Anthony and Isabella moved through the abandoned docks, the smell of salt water mingling with rust and decay. Isabella whispered, "These shipments are theirs. Weapons, drugs, everything. Burn it, and you cut off their veins." Anthony crouched, inspecting crates marked with the rival family's crest. His tone was cold steel. Burning them is easy. Surviving what follows won't be. Shadows shifted, and Victor appeared silently, his blade already drawn. Dominic emerged from the dark, pistol in hand, muttering, "We light this place, they'll come hunting us by sunrise." Anthony lit a match, its flame flickering like a promise. He said, "Then, let them come. We'll choke them on their own smoke." The docks groaned with the weight of war about to be born in fire. The fire spread fast, devouring crates, black smoke clawing into the night sky. Anthony stood firm as the flames roared, his men retreating in awe and fear. Isabella smirked through the glow, her voice sharp, "Now they'll bleed." Dominic's jaw tightened as he said, "Or we just painted a target on our backs." Victor remained silent, his face lit by the blaze, his blade dripping with the blood of dock guards who would tell no tales. Anthony raised his pistol and fired a single shot into the sky, the sound echoing across the harbor like a declaration. He shouted, "This is our city. We'll burn every inch of it before we surrender." The inferno reflected in his eyes, turning him into something more than a man, a symbol of defiance carved from fire and blood. By dawn, word of the blaze spread like a plague. The rival family struck back swiftly, ambushing Rossi men in alleys and tearing apart businesses. Anthony returned to the mansion, his clothes still reeking of smoke, his eyes carved from sleepless fury. In the hall, survivors lined up, their faces hollow, their numbers halved. Dominic whispered, "We can't take this war head on." Isabella snapped back, "Then die crawling." "I won't." Victor stepped forward, his knife still fresh with blood, his voice low. "The more they bleed, the less they breathe." Anthony raised his hand, silencing them all. His voice was sharp and final. "We no longer fight for power. We fight for survival. Anyone not ready for that leaves now." Not a man moved. Fear chained them in place, and loyalty bound them to death. That night, Anthony stood alone in the mansion's chapel, the same candles flickering weaker than ever. He whispered into the silence, "Father, forgive me for the sins I haven't yet committed." Behind him, Isabella entered quietly, her tone softer than before. "Faith won't shield you." Anthony turned, his expression hollow. "It isn't faith. It's confession before damnation." Dominic appeared in the doorway, his face shadowed by grief. "Every war leaves bones," he said. "Make sure they're not all ours." From the corner, Victor stepped from the dark, his voice quiet but chilling. "When this ends, nothing remains." The candles sputtered, their flames flickering as if the chapel itself knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the one within its walls. The city trembled under the weight of reprisal. Anthony's men struck back, storming rival gambling dens and burning warehouses. Anthony moved through gunfire like a man possessed, his pistol barking retribution. Dominic shouted, "We can't fight shadows forever." Anthony's voice cut back, "Then we drag the shadows into the light." Isabella, her blade slick with blood, snarled, "Every rival falls, but the real enemy still hides." Victor stood in silence amid corpses, his knife dripping, his face unreadable. As smoke filled the streets, Anthony knew this was no victory, only a pause before the storm's final strike. The city was drowning in blood, and the line between vengeance and survival blurred with every trigger pull. At the estate, Anthony reviewed reports of the night's carnage. His men whispered of ghosts haunting their ranks, traitors feeding the enemy. Dominic said, "We kill faster than they can count. But we bleed faster too. Isabella leaned close, her eyes sharp. One of yours betrays you. Find them, or you'll bury the rest. Victor cleaned his blade silently, his silence heavier than accusation. Anthony's voice thundered, then tonight, loyalty is tested. No one walks away without proving where they stand. Fear rippled through the room, men glancing at each other as if betrayal lingered in every breath. Trust had vanished, replaced by suspicion, sharp enough to kill. The ambush came at the Rossi warehouse. Trucks roared in, armed men pouring bullets into the walls. Anthony shouted commands, leading from the front, firing until his pistol smoked. Dominic ducked behind crates, screaming. They knew would be here. Isabella slashed through attackers, her blade flashing crimson arcs. Victor moved like a phantom, cutting down men faster than bullets could. Anthony's rage burned, his voice thundering. We fight to the last breath. Explosions tore through the warehouse, smoke and flames swallowing everything. The battle ended in silence, but half their men lay cold, and the enemy was still stronger. In the aftermath, Anthony stood in ruins, smoke rising from bodies around him. His voice cracked with fury. We bleed, because one of us feeds them. Dominic said hoarsely, if you don't find them, we're finished. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her words a dagger. The betrayer is closer than you want to believe. Victor's silence was suffocating, his gaze locked on Anthony as if weighing him. Anthony's fists clenched, his voice breaking into steel. Then we cut out the traitor. Tonight. His men froze, dread written in their eyes. The truth would come, and when it did, blood would answer betrayal. That night, in the estate's council chamber, Anthony gathered his closest. Candles flickered against the faces of men who had once sworn unbreakable oaths. Anthony's voice thundered. Betrayal hides among us, but tonight, masks fall. Dominic whispered, this will tear us apart. Isabella smirked coldly, better torn apart than rotting from within. Victor stepped forward, his voice low, say the word, and I'll find. Anthony's gaze swept the room, heavy with fire, his words final. Then let the guilty choke on their lies. Tonight, blood proves loyalty. The chamber fell into silence, every heartbeat waiting for the first blade to strike. The council chamber reeked of smoke and fear, the men staring at Anthony Rossi as if awaiting execution. Anthony's voice cut sharp through the silence. The betrayer breathes among us. Dominic Marino leaned forward, his tone raw. Point the finger and the family ends tonight. Isabella Romano circled the room, her heels clicking like knives against marble, whispering, the truth doesn't need words, it bleeds out when pressed. Victor Santoro stood silent in the corner, his shadow larger than life, his expression unreadable. Anthony's eyes burned as he continued, one of you feeds our enemies. And when I find who, I'll carve their name into fire. No one moved. Every heartbeat echoed like a countdown to judgment. Fear clung to the chamber walls, thick as blood. At midnight, Anthony met Isabella in the deserted courtyard. Rain soaked the stones as lightning carved the sky. Isabella's tone was sharp. The betrayer hides in your bloodline. Anthony's glare snapped. Careful what you say. She stepped closer, defiant. You won't admit it, but deep down you know it's family. Her words struck like a blade, twisting deeper with each breath. Anthony's voice cracked. If blood has betrayed me, then nothing remains sacred. Isabella touched his arm briefly, whispering, then you must decide, blood or survival. Anthony pulled away, his jaw set like iron. The rain fell harder, drowning any answer he might have given. The truth was closer than ever, and it terrified him. The revelation came inside the study, when Anthony discovered secret files hidden within Richard's safe. Photographs, bank transfers, coded notes, all tied to a name he trusted most. His sibling, Daniel Rossi, the one who shared his blood. Anthony's breath faltered, his fists trembling as he whispered, "It was you." Dominic entered quietly, reading the truth in Anthony's eyes. "God help us," he muttered. Isabella appeared behind them, her expression unreadable, saying coldly, "I warned you. Betrayal never comes from strangers." The room spun as Anthony's world shattered. Blood was no longer family. Family was the knife. The confrontation erupted in the grand hall. Daniel Rossi entered, calm and collected, his smirk a dagger. Anthony's voice cracked with rage. "You were my blood, my brother, and you gutted us from the inside." Daniel's reply was venomous. "I saved us from rotting in chains. You're blind, Anthony. The family needed purging." Dominic shouted, "You betrayed us all for power." Daniel sneered, "Not power. Survival in a world bigger than you imagine." Anthony raised his gun, hand trembling, his soul breaking. The family's fate balanced on a single heartbeat, and the hall held its breath for war between brothers. Daniel's revelation cut deeper. The syndicate was only a pawn, controlled by unseen elites, politicians, cartels, global powers. His words dripped poison. "We were never kings. Only puppets." Anthony's chest heaved, the truth burning his soul. Isabella muttered, "So the empire was built on lies." Dominic shook his head, whispering, "God help us all." Victor finally spoke, his voice like stone. "Then kill the puppeteer, not the puppet." Anthony lowered his gun, trembling. His whisper was broken. "Then everything we've bled for means nothing." The war was no longer about family. It was about exposing the world's darkest truth. The final battle began at the isolated estate of the hidden mastermind. The mansion gleamed like a fortress, guarded by mercenaries. Anthony Rossi led his fractured family forward, his voice harsh. "Tonight, we end it or die trying." Dominic muttered, "This place is a graveyard waiting to happen." Isabella smirked with defiance, "Then let's carve their names into its walls." Victor checked his blade, silent, his eyes promising death. Anthony's gaze burned toward the gates, whispering, "No more chains, no more lies." With thunder rolling above, they marched toward the gates of hell. Gunfire erupted as mercenaries poured from the gates. Anthony's men fell, but he charged forward, firing without hesitation. Dominic's revolver thundered, his voice hoarse, "Push them back." Isabella cut through soldiers like a storm, her blade flashing. Victor was death itself, his silence drowned by screams. Anthony shouted, "No retreat!" The ground shook with explosions, walls crumbling under fire. For every enemy that fell, two more rose. Yet the family fought, fueled by vengeance and despair. The night became fire and blood, every heartbeat a gamble against death. Inside the estate, Anthony confronted the mastermind, a cold-eyed politician who had pulled strings from the shadows. The man smirked, "You think you were ever kings? You were pawns in my empire." Anthony's rage boiled, his pistol trembling in his hand. Isabella snarled, "Then you'll choke on the empire you built." Dominic whispered, "Careful, Anthony. One bullet won't change the world." Victor's gaze locked on Anthony, his voice deep. "Choose. Revenge or truth." The weight of every death pressed on Anthony's chest. His soul balanced on the edge of damnation. The room erupted in violence. Anthony fired, striking guards while Victor tore through men like a shadowed beast. Isabella fought with ruthless grace, Dominic covering her with his revolver. The politician fled deeper into the estate, shouting orders. Anthony chased, his voice raw, "No more lies." The mansion echoed with screams, bullets, and breaking glass. Blood painted marble floors, chandeliers crashed from ceilings. It was war in its purest form, chaos born from vengeance. Anthony's footsteps thundered toward the man who had poisoned his world. In the final chamber, Anthony cornered the mastermind, who cowered behind a desk of gold. The politician sneered, "Kill me, and another takes my place." This web is endless. Anthony's pistol wavered, sweat dripping, his soul in torment. Isabella's voice was sharp. "End him, Anthony." Dominic whispered, "Expose him. Tear down the empire instead." Victor's voice was low. "Decide. Blood or redemption." Anthony's eyes burned as he pulled the trigger, but not at the man. At the ceiling lights, plunging the chamber into darkness. He growled, "Your empire dies in the light of truth." The mastermind's scream echoed as armed men burst in to seize him. Anthony dropped his pistol, his soul fractured but alive.